Well, hey everybody, welcome back to 6 Feet Under Exhumed. This is the rewatcher series of 6 Feet Under, the HBO TV series. I'm Kari, the Mortician.
I'm Faith, that mortuary professor. Michelle is with us again. Hi, Michelle.
Okay.
Hi.
Michelle owns a embalming kind of, you have a central embalming location that you do. She does a restorative art, clinic? What do you call it?
Yeah, we hands-on lab, cadaver labs.
Yeah,
So yeah,
so
it's
people fly from all over the world to Texas, where Michelle's located, to do these 3-day sessions of learning to restore and working on an actual damaged human body to restore parts of them for viewability. And this episode is a great episode to have her here to discuss. So life's too short. So how do we start this one, Faith? Who is our deceased?
We are at the home of Gabe, who we haven't seen in some time. He's the guy that Claire was involved with that had the in the back of the hearse, like the toe
Oh,
God, I hate
sucking.
that. So the toes the toe, you can tell what I'm not into, the toe sucking, and the toe slut stuff and all that stuff. So they have cut ties and haven't been involved. And we're at his house and he's playing a video game and his friend comes over and his mom is gone and he has a younger brother who's 6 years old,
Six.
6 years old. And he's watching him and the friend comes over with weed and they want to smoke the weed. So they tell the little boy, hey, get out of here, go in another room. And he kind of yells at him. Pretty normal, sibling stuff. And the little boy goes into the mother's room and finds a gun and accidentally shoots himself and dies. And so that's how it opens. Pretty awful.
Well, and Eric Balfour, who plays Gabe, I would have never thought, oh, he's a phenomenal actor. In these next episode, in this arc of his storyline, is wonderful. Like he does such a great job, and
He
him
does.
going and seeing, like they never show the child. You just
No.
hear this gun discharge. He goes running, and you watch him see his little brother from out in the hallway. They never show the kid and just his reaction and you feel it and it's a good, like he just does it so good in it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Um
he does a great job and it's pretty terrible. And then it kind of steps away from that. So that's how it opens. But then it goes more into like the lives of the characters for a while and comes back to,
mhm.
the little boy. So David has been kind of seeing this square dancing guy. This is interesting to me. I don't know. I noticed the dumbest thing. So the whole like stuff with the square dancing guy is that he's so much younger than David, but David's 30.
Yeah.
Like, am I just that old where I'm like, a 30-year-old dating like a 25-year-old? Shut up about being so much older. Come on.
Yeah, it's not that
Yeah.
big of a deal.
It's not that big of a deal, but they bring it up multiple times in this episode how like David's old and this guy's young. And I'm like, he's in a master's program. He's got to be, at the youngest, 23, 24. And
Yeah.
David's 30. So they're like making this big storyline about how they're just from different generations. And I
Not
think
like
it's
he's
really
18
lame.
or something.
It's
It's
not like he's
not, yeah.
18. No. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but they were at a dance club and they did ecstasy and the guy gives him two pills for later and David's at the house and he's got the pills in his pocket and he's got a aspirin bottle out because and then his mom comes in and he's like, oh, oh shit. So he hurries up and puts the two pills in the aspirin bottles and puts it back in the cabinet and we kind of forget about that for a minute, but then
Yeah.
what?
For now.
Yeah, for now.
Yeah. When he goes to the club, he runs into Keith,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of goes through that whole thing, like and it's like he's trying on these new guys in this kind of
Yeah.
life of, salacious, just, put myself out there and
Yeah.
spread my love around sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Right.
And, but then seeing Keith, I think he's like, oh, but I'm kind of in love.
He is. And
Yeah.
this, I will say, as a queer person, this is a good representation of what we call baby gays or baby queers. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard that term, but
No.
it's somebody that when they first come out, no matter how old they are. So in David, I would consider David young. I'm 40. So
Yeah.
to me, 30 is not by any means old. And when a person first comes out and decides, and he's not even openly
Mm-mm.
living as a gay man yet, but when they decide they are going to explore those things, oftentimes they will go to the clubs, they will get involved with younger people, they will get involved with things that maybe don't align with who they truly are because they're just trying to discover where they fit into this culture of queerness, and it's a culture unlike anything else, but it's also like everything else in that there's different, no two gay men are the same. They have different interests. They're individuals, right? But like you kind of get okay, well, I'm gay. I'm accepted. I'm gay or I'm queer or whatever the word is that best fits you. And now I've got to get out into that lifestyle. But the only lifestyle that's out there is the club scene. So
Yeah.
you get out
Right.
there and you're doing these things, these drugs and these people and this, promiscuous sex, I guess could be part of that. That may not really be who you are. But you're out there trying to figure out who you are, and that's what David is doing. So they do a really good job in the show of showing him coming to terms with his own, sexuality, trying to figure out what that means for him as far as a lifestyle, but keeping doing things that aren't really who David is. And that's just another aspect of that. He's out at the club, and I don't think that's really necessarily who Keith is either. So it's interesting that you're seeing they just want to be married and watching Wheel of Fortune and, eating
Yeah.
dinner at 4:30. That's who they are. And that's okay to be that, but they have to figure out that's who they are by doing all the things that they're not first. And that's where they both are. But they see each other at the club. It's pretty obviously there's still something there between them.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I have to say
Like
about
a
that.
silent-
Just ran with that one. Sorry, guys. But it's such a good show, and the characters are so
They do.
so
You
well
get
developed and so deep.
like you get watching it, and then it's like, oh my gosh, I want to know what happens next right this minute. Like, even though I've watched the whole thing before, but all the little minute details, it's like it's all you don't remember all these little moments.
You don't, but it's
A lot.
so good at because we're only 9 episodes into a whole series, which in the course of the series, what 60 something episodes, I think you said, Kari.
Yeah.
And we've already had all these things happen with Keith, and now to us as the viewer get to see him across the club, and your heart kind of stops. It'll be like, oh,
You're like there he is.
oh, Keith. And then, but it makes it you kind of feel like what David's feeling. So it's such a good show, not only for what it talks about in the funeral industry, but just the character development is really, it's really great in the show. But anyway, they're doing their thing. And, Ruth is in this kind of quasi thing with Hiram, the hairdresser, but she doesn't really know if she really wants to be with him because, as is the case oftentimes in relationships that begin when people are in other relationships, they then find out that the person that they were messing around with was fun to mess around with, but maybe they don't really want to be with them. And I think that's what's happening for her.
Yeah.
Well, she has Nikolai that's
Oh God.
paying attention and
Uh-huh.
everything. I love that she has all these men that are like after Ruth.
And they're so different too.
I just love that she is
Yeah.
redefining that she is still this sexual being. She's still needing attention and needing love. She's not just this depressed, lonely, widowed woman who's going to sit at home. And I think that's just fun to watch her kind of get
I
back out
wish
there.
that we knew more clearly how much time has elapsed. That's one thing I don't feel like is clear to me, at least in this season one. Like, how long has her husband been dead now? Is it a couple months? Is it, I mean, I know it's not a year yet, but like, are we talking like 6 weeks have gone by or like 6 months? It's not really clear. But she's got Nikolai and Hiram both, wanting her, and they're just very different, and it's funny. And I don't think she really likes either one of them all that much.
No.
No.
She does, I think, is it the next episode? She kind of realizes some more feelings towards Nikolai and stuff and goes into that next episode. But yeah, well, and we find out at the beginning that Nate failed his test.
Oh,
Yes.
can we talk about this for a
Ugh.
minute? Because this kind of irritated me. He didn't have to go to school.
That's
He
what I was
just
gonna say. Why is
No,
he?
it is California. Now, remember, in
Oh, that's
California,
right.
maybe, I don't know, dude, listen, listeners, do not fact check me. I'm making all this up. But I think in California, in order to be a funeral arranger or maybe a funeral director, you don't have to go to school, only if you want to be an embalmer. That's the case in some states. I
Mhm.
don't know what it is or what it was then. But what I do know is that Nate hasn't gone to mortuary school and suddenly he's sitting for what they call the funeral director's exam. I don't know if that's supposed to be just the state test or
I
if that's
think
supposed to be
it's
the
just
national
I
or
think it's
what.
the state test is what
Okay.
it seems like. But what were
Bless you.
what were the precursors to that? Like for in Ohio, it's two different licenses. You
Right.
can be an arranger or a funeral director and make arrangements and lead services, but you can't do prep. You don't go to mortuary school. And I believe it's 2 years. You have to do kind of like an apprenticeship as a director for 2 years, and then you do the state board and then you're licensed. So I don't know if that's how California, but I only know, I think from Caitlin Doty, because she went to mortuary school, didn't chose not to be licensed as that though, but isn't she just a
She
funeral?
did not graduate from mortuary school, to my knowledge, according to this, what I know. But again, don't fact check me. I'm not
I
saying
just
anything
know
that's
just
true or not
from
true.
because I know she's
She
only
calls
a
herself a
funeral
mortician. I
director.
don't know that one who has not graduated an accredited mortuary school and be licensed should call themselves that. That's my personal opinion. I don't know if she finished whatever she did, but my understanding, I may be wrong, my understanding is that she went to mortuary school, did not graduate, but got a license as a funeral arranger or director or whatever in
That's
California that you don't have to have gone to school to get.
then
And
that's why I'm
so
thinking that's two, and then
I think
yeah,
so.
that's my only kind of context from
Kind of point
having
of reference.
kind of knowing that she is licensed as a funeral director but not embalming.
That's
Oh,
what's so
It's two different.
frustrating to me about how every state is so different,
Oh, I hate
that
it.
these
Yeah.
things mean different things, and what you can call yourself in one state, you could never call yourself in another, and it causes so much confusion.
Oh, it
So
does.
like for, people that are out there in the public, people assume that they are licensed in these things that they're not, because they don't have to be. They're not necessarily doing anything wrong. But then if you're from Michigan, or I'm sorry, Minnesota or Ohio, you can't dare call yourself that without all this laundry list of qualifications. So it's
right.
just listeners that aren't part of the industry, just please understand every state is different in their requirements.
Mhm.
And what's true in one state is not true in the other. So we can't apply these terms to everybody, as if they should all mean the same thing, because they don't. What is it in Texas? What do
That's what
you
I was
have to
gonna
do in
say.
Texas?
You have to graduate from accredited mortuary school,
Okay.
pass the national board,
Mhm.
but you also have to do a 1-year apprenticeship.
Okay.
And our
Yeah.
licenses are separate. So there's two separate licenses in Texas. There's a funeral director license and an embalmer license,
Yeah. See, I'm
which is
originally
a
licensed.
apprenticeship for both.
Oh, okay, yeah. See, I'm originally licensed in Illinois, which is a dual license, which means you have to go to mortuary school. You can't begin an apprenticeship until you've graduated mortuary school, taken the boards, and then you do a 1-year apprenticeship, directing, arranging, and embalming, all inclusive. And then at the end of that, you are a licensed funeral director and embalmer. It's one license. And that's how it is in New Mexico too. It's a funeral service practitioner. It's arranging, directing, embalming. They're not separate. So some states have them separated out into 4 or 5 different licenses, which is a lot. So I guess, yeah, I mean, I think you're right, Kari. I guess we can just assume that he's trying to get a license as an arranger or a director, because he doesn't ever do any prep. Somebody that doesn't need to go to mortuary school to do those things, which is not the case everywhere, which is a source of frustration, I think, for everybody, because nobody knows what you're supposed to have anywhere, because it's
Right.
different anywhere. So
Well, and like we
Yeah.
talked reciprocation, when you and I talked about the Colorado kind of scandal
Mhm.
going on and talking
Yeah.
about reciprocating licenses and stuff, that's where it gets hard. So
It
you
does.
say you are in California and you're licensed as an arranger and funeral director or whatever, you can't come to Michigan and work as that. Like it doesn't transfer
Right.
because we're a dual license here as well. So you can't just reciprocate some of those licenses because you're not licensed to do what the license entails here.
Right.
So I think that is weird. And like, did he not have to do any classes? Like, is there no, we need to look this up. Is there no precursor
Yeah.
classes
I
to?
mean, I don't know, whatever I guess we could look up what you had to do in 2001 in California. Maybe we can
Yeah.
find out. But I guess from the show, we're led to believe that he's done whatever he's supposed to do to be
Right.
able to sit for what I can only assume is the California test, not the national test, because you can't sit for the national test without doing a lot of other things. And so he's trying to get licensed as something in California so he can meet families on his own, is what David, says, and he fails the test. And I love that they're there in person and he's like, they're telling him all that because I don't know. Mine was you had to go to a testing center and take it on a computer. It was probably
Yep.
one of the first years though that you had to do that. I don't know. I know,
Yep.
Kari, you've been licensed longer
I
than
was filling
us.
a bubble.
You
I am
were filling bubbles.
old. We were filling bubbles. What'd you do,
Yeah.
Michelle? Were you on computer taking yours?
Yeah, ours was on a computer and it popped up. Like there was nobody that told you. When you got done taking the test, it popped up and it said pass. I don't
Oh
know what it
God.
says if you don't pass, but I'm like, does it say
Not
fail?
it doesn't say
What does
fail,
it
it says
say?
not pass.
I'm
But
like,
you had to wait 6 weeks for the letter to come in the mail. You didn't
Yes.
know that day. You had to wait. It
oh
came
no.
6 weeks later in the mail for us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
ours just popped up. I actually got in trouble in the testing center because mine popped up and I like squealed out loud. You can't make any noises.
Well,
But
it's a big deal. I mean, that's
Yes, we
what
do.
my national and my state were both in a chair filling bubbles. Both. It was old school.
like a Scantron.
Old school. Yep.
A lot of the states in Wyoming, this kills me. In Wyoming, you have to go up to the Capitol and sit before the board and be orally examined in person.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm good.
Used to here in Texas, before, long before me, but one of the guys that works for me, you used to have to go embalm in front of the state board. Like they had an actual body and
Ooh.
several people came in. And I shouldn't say you embalmed. What he says is that you would walk in and the board is sitting there and they would tell you raise the left femoral and then they would tell you, raise the right radial and like you had to do that in front
I
of
want to
them.
do that.
I know. I thought that was
It's
neat.
like
So,
a
I've never had to do it,
body
but
game show or something. It's like
I know.
We had to do it in school. I don't know about you guys. We had to do all that, but yeah, but well, anyway, back to the show. He fails it. He feels terrible because he's let David down. He's still gotta, I assume David still has to do everything and Nate can't do anything on his own. Here's what's interesting though. Nate does transfers on his own. And part of like that whole
Yeah.
Colorado licensing thing we were talking about, in some states you can't do transfers unless you're licensed or at least an intern. In other states, anybody can do them. So
Yeah.
I guess we can assume in California at that time you didn't have to have any
Mhm.
qualifications to do transfers. So.
We don't have to in Michigan at all.
I was gonna say, do you guys have to? Do y'all faith have to be licensed in
You
your
don't have to be
state?
licensed to do anything in Colorado.
Oh yeah, true statement. So yeah. Yeah. In Texas, we don't have to be licensed to make removals either.
But this
So
came
just-
up because in the licensing that they're proposing, it says anyone that handles human remains has to be licensed, which I don't think they haven't thought through all the steps because that's going to be do transfer people have to be licensed? Do crematory people have to be licensed? Funeral directors, they haven't hashed it all out. But in some states you do, in some states you don't have to be licensed.
Yeah, which is wild. That's even making arrangements. Like in Michigan, you don't have to be licensed to make arrangements at all. The only thing we
Really?
have to be licensed for here is overseeing the final disposition and embalming. That's it. Signing the death certificate. That's it.
See, it's the
So the
opposite in a
actual-
lot of places because in New Mexico, at least when I was there, you had to be licensed to make arrangements. But if you were an intern, you could take a service out to a cemetery.
Oh, no.
Wow.
Interns or apprentices have to be overseen by a funeral director at all times, so they can't go by themselves. They would have
You
to,
do that.
yeah.
It's backwards
So
there.
Kari, even on the arrangement side there, the financial transaction doesn't have to be done with a licensed person either.
Mhm.
Wow.
Nope,
Yeah.
nope, just an arranger. So yeah, there's just some things that are just super lax. It's super strict in all these other weird areas like cremation and stuff, and like the authorizations and things are super strict, but then other areas are not. It's kind of odd.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that was weird until you get into all the other states and everything. And like Indiana, you gotta be licensed to sign, at the hospital to get a body, or taking a burial at a cemetery with cremated remains, you have to have a licensed director there. Not just like here, I mean, a family can take cremated remains,
Yeah.
and go bury them at the cemetery on their own. You can't.
You can't.
There. They have to have a director overseeing it, even if it's just cremated remains. And I'm like, that seems odd to me.
That seems a lot because you
It
spend,
seems extra.
what about like national cemeteries? How many families bring to that? Probably none, I guess, there. At
No.
least here. Well, here's
Yeah.
different, but in New Mexico even, families could take cremated remains to the national cemetery themselves and other cemeteries on their own.
Which is interesting, but that's federal. So you wonder if, like in Indiana, if that's different because it's federal.
Well, at one point, is it human remains and is it not anymore? Because
Well,
if we're gonna,
technically, yeah, after cremation, it's not considered human remains. The disposition is complete.
but in some places
essentially.
apparently not, because if you have to,
So,
it's
yeah.
so weird.
So it's interesting, but yeah, so a big part of this whole episode is they sit down with Gabe and his mom for this little boy's planning of the funeral. Mom is beside herself, can't make any decisions. Gabe's the one really trying to make all the decisions here because mom's not answering a lot of what they're asking. And he said, we'll have an open casket service. And the way David talks, it's too weirdly formal. Like nobody speaks that way.
Nobody.
Yeah.
And that drives me nuts about this show. What did you think watching it, Michelle?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's extremely formal. Even when he was sitting there, his emotions were more like he was trying to be a professional to answer the questions versus being a grieving brother.
Yeah.
It was, so you could tell some in some places I think that's where the characters kind of fall off a little bit, I guess.
Yeah.
For me, it's like from what's real, and no
Right.
grieving brother is acting that way most of the time, I guess, is what we see.
Well, and
Yeah.
and so they talk about the open casket, and she's like, I don't want to see my kid. And they're like, nope, we're closing that casket.
Stop. She says, I don't want to see him in a box. She doesn't say, I don't want to see
I don't
my
want to see
kid.
him in a box. Yep.
She says, I don't want to see him in a box. And they go immediately to, well, it'll be a closed casket. Stop. Put the brakes on.
Yes.
That's bad listening.
Yep.
I don't know if y'all caught
Put him
that,
in a
but that's
bed.
bad
I
listening.
did.
Put him on a table, put him
Yep.
where anywhere but the casket. Then
Mhm.
that's easy.
Okay. Yeah.
Seems simple. Yeah, that's what I thought too. I thought, why didn't we offer to do something else?
Okay.
A table, but we'll dress it up where it looks like a bed, that kind of thing. Like they didn't even offer that to her.
Well, and we don't even know what he looks like. We don't know it was a handgun, wasn't a shotgun, a rifle type thing. We don't know what damage was done to him. They never really explain or talk about how much restoration would be needed, what he might look like.
I wish they had, because I'm willing to bet, and again, it's TV, but in the real life, I would be willing to bet it's easily viewable.
Yeah. But he did say in the kitchen with his brother, he did make mention that he didn't want to be restoring a 6-year-old's head today. You know what I mean? He did make a
different job, bud.
Yeah.
I mean,
nobody's going to choose that.
Nobody wants to. I mean, people love the restorative art aspect and the embalming aspect. I don't think anybody, is excited that it's a child ever.
No.
I kind of felt like I don't want to use the word excited, but he might have been relieved because now they don't have, I'm sorry, the man's name.
Federico.
Yeah, Federico. They no longer have Federico. So I kind of felt like maybe he was relieved that they wanted a closed casket because he was like, okay, this was more work than I could, bite off and choose. So.
Like maybe he just went there on purpose, be like, oh,
yeah,
okay,
like the minute she said that, he was like, oh, thank God.
Probably.
And I was kind of waiting for Gabe to almost say something like what we can see, how can we see, like to say like, how could we see him, or how is that even possible? Because he had seen the kid. And so it was like, I was waiting for him to say something in that little conversation, and he didn't. So, because I was hoping him posing like well, how, funeral director, man, can you ever make that possible? And they would be like, well, we are restorative artists and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, here it comes. And then it was gone. And I was like,
it was gone.
Well, that was poo-pooey.
Yeah.
But yeah, small, handguns, typically are it's
Swelling.
hopeful.
Yeah, I
Hopeful
mean,
that you can do viewing because the exit might be a little larger, but typically the entry is small. There is some swelling, might bounce around in if the bullet or whatever. But what have you guys seen with?
generally swelling and bruising.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Around the eyes, swelling
Yeah.
in the eyes,
Yeah.
bruising around the eyes. But yeah, typically, like you said, small entry wound, maybe a little bit larger exit wound, depending on the caliber, but typically those are fine.
Yeah.
They're
Nothing
nothing, they're nothing
that
that you can't take on.
Yeah.
shouldn't be anything, in my opinion, that a funeral home would immediately go to. Oh no, we can't do that.
Yeah.
But
Right.
what really, really struck me is that she said, I don't want to see him in a box, and they just stopped there.
Like done.
She didn't say she didn't want to see him. And families do this. They don't realize. That's why you have to talk through it with them. Are you saying you don't want to see him? Or are you saying you don't want to see him in a cat? Like there's a difference there, and they didn't do a good job, I feel like, in this episode of showing the director actually directing,
Yeah.
and walking them through those options and talking about those things. They just went immediately to, okay, well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is
It is
sad
bad.
because those opportunities, especially with children, like to never see your child again. I can't.
Well, and then later on in the episode, they show David dressing him, and he looks up at, Adam, and what's being inferred is that they haven't restored his head. If I've got a kid, even if the family didn't ask, I'm going to make sure that kid is viewable, because you know what's going to happen? They're going to change their mind, and maybe they won't, but the one time they do, and they do,
Yeah.
and you haven't done anything, that's
Yep.
just bad. Like you always assume that even if it's just the littlest amount of cosmetic or reconstructive or whatever it is, even if it's just the littlest amount, you, in my opinion, as a professional, need to assume that they're going to change their mind, and you need to
Yeah.
be prepared to let them see that person at the last minute if they choose. And it was obvious to me from how they were showing David looking at him that hadn't been done, and I just thought that's a bad representation. I think any good director would not have just left them.
Even if he didn't want to do the full restoration, like you're saying,
Right.
even if the damage was just head, put a little hat on him, cover it,
Yep.
just cover what's
Yep.
there rather than maybe restoring it, but do as much
Mhm.
as you can in a simple version.
Mm-hmm.
Just in case, like you're saying, if they're like, you know what, I do want to see them, or they go up and they throw the casket open because you didn't lock it or something, and
Right.
try to see him, or whatever the scenario, you want it to be as to the point that you can get him.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
And I believe that, I'm glad that you said that, because I believe that all the way to even not restoration cases like this, but even all the way to, they brought clothes, dressed somebody's loved one. Do you know how many times I see, being a crematory, how many times funeral homes bring cremated, or boxed remains to me, and the clothes are just laying on top of them.
mhm.
And it's because somebody brought clothes, but they didn't want to see them, so they just laid the clothes on top of
Well, they
the.
didn't bring clothes for them to be laid out. I mean, I don't wear my clothes laying on top of my body. I don't know about y'all, but
I know, and that's just, that just goes to
Lazy.
show one of those things that, for me, one, I think it's wrong. I would always
it
do
is
it, but
wrong.
two, I'm like, are you guys not terrified that at the last second? Because typically these are in, rental caskets. Typically
Yep.
they still had
Mhm.
some type of something.
Yeah.
Are you guys not terrified that at the last second they're going to decide that they want to see grandma and her dress is
I
just laying
would
on
be.
top of her?
You
Yeah.
want to know what I saw once? This is not exactly the same thing, but I have to tell you guys this because you'll appreciate it. Sorry, listeners, if you don't understand, but I think it's pretty straightforward. When I was an intern, and I interned in 3 different places because I at the time that I graduated school, there was a strike. This was in Chicago with the SCI strike, if you guys remember that.
Mhm.
And nobody could get a job. And so I had to intern at 3 small rural family owned funeral homes all over, the state at the same time, which was difficult because you had to have well, anyway. In one place that I was at, when they had an autopsied case, instead of putting the viscera back, they would just put the viscera in somebody else's cremation container and cremate it.
Yeah, I've heard
So
that.
So if I was autopsied, my viscera would be out. It would be treated in a bag, all of this. And then in most cases, the embalmer will then put it back into the cavity because those are my organs, and all of that. And in this case, this funeral home would not put the viscera back. They would just put whatever, nothing. And then that bag of viscera the next time they had a cremation. So it's my organs. And then Kari's also there being cremated. She's somebody I don't even know. She's just somebody else's mom or sister or something. They put my organs in her cremation casket and cremate them.
Oh my gosh.
And I thought one of these days they're going to want a second autopsy or somebody's going to be disinterred for some reason.
Yep.
It's going to take one time and your business is going to be gone, you dummies. And so far, I don't know if they're still doing that. It never came to light.
Terrible.
But as an intern, you're scared to say that's wrong or you shouldn't do that. Say it. I wish I had. Because so many people's organs aren't with them in that particular part of the country. They are cremated with a complete stranger, and it's terrible.
It's terrible. And so where you were at, that is something that was illegal, or it wasn't actually illegal?
To be honest, I don't know. I would imagine it was it's unethical. I don't know, what the code or what the law was in that particular state at that time, if there was absolutely, because in a lot of places, there's not a lot of specifics, when it comes to these things. I don't know if it ever said anywhere, all organs must remain with the body. I don't know that it ever said that, so maybe not. But my God.
A part of a person without authorization from
I would say that you'd have a case for sure, even if it's not,
which is illegal.
Yeah,
so it's really breaking two laws.
It is
doing that, let alone the family that has chosen the cremation could sue because you've put other body parts in with them. I mean, none of the cremated remains coming back are going to be that. All of those internal organs are completely incinerated off.
Sure.
But it's the ethical and legal is redonkulous with
because you don't want to take the extra 10 minutes and put viscera back in because it's hard. My God, you've done everything else.
Yeah,
I know. Yeah.
I remember.
Well, in Texas, it's actually, that the viscera it stays with the body.
Yep.
So it's actually, written down.
It is the body. It should. Yeah.
It stays with the body. Even if you're in a situation that you just had to, treat the viscera, place it in a bag and put it at the foot end of the casket, it stays with the body. So even, here, that kind of situation would just off the jump, you've broken a law, not to mention unethical, but off the jump, you have separated them.
They always told us at school, the BOG and the BOC, the bag of guts on the bottom of the casket. When you place it at the foot of the casket, the BOG and the BOC. I've never done that. I've always put them back in the abdomen, but we'll never forget that little phrase. But I remember a case back, it would have been early 2000s. There was a lawsuit down Southern Ohio or Northern West Virginia. I can't remember which side of the river it was on. Where my friend worked, and the neighboring funeral home was getting sued because at the cemetery, it was a graveside only, no viewing. They decided they wanted to see grandma or mom or whoever and open the casket at the cemetery. And
you got to be prepared for that.
Her hair was not brushed. Her eyes and mouth were not closed. Her clothing had just been laid in there with her. They had done nothing to prepare her. And that's a charge on the contract is just casketing, cosmetizing. I mean, it's all part of putting them in that casket. You can't just skip all the other steps, especially if they brought clothing, like Michelle said, especially if, there might be a chance that they might open the I mean, for God's sake, just close the eyes and mouth at least. Do something. So they had a huge lawsuit over it because they opened this casket and grandma's like, staring up at them naked and come on, guys. So you just don't know. At the end of the day, moral of the story, do your due diligence.
Do all of it every time. Because the one time you don't, all it takes is, and it's the right thing to do anyway. It doesn't matter if you're caught or not. Yeah. But if that's a motivating factor for you being caught, it just takes one time. It just takes once.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's over.
And it's over. And so many, the things that people cut corners on because they think it's not important or it'll never matter but that's one thing and that kind of made me unhappy with this episode is that it was clear to me that they didn't do anything and they really should have, especially because it was a young person.
Child,
come on. Come on.
They
I did see him, put socks and shoes on,
Yeah.
the little boy.
he washed
but
his
that's-
nails. I remember him washing
Yeah.
his little hand, and which was sad. Little hand.
Ugh.
There was a
It's-
quote. I wrote this down. I don't remember who said it. A man should know the history of his business unless he wants to be an amateur. And I don't remember who said it.
Billy said it because when Nate was sitting at dinner with Billy and Brenda, he was telling them how he failed the test. And
Oh,
Billy started going on the just kind of like, activating him and trying to get a rise out of Nate by saying all these things he knows about death and because he's that way. And Nate said something back to him, and he was like, that's when he said that. Like, you should know this stuff if you're gonna be.
kind of like that. Like you can't be better and achieve a certain success if you don't know the reason behind your business and why
Right.
that industry exists and where you came from to know where you're going, kind of thing. And then Brenda also talks about, which I hate, it's so cliche, but there's no term for a parent who loses a child. There's widow, there's all this stuff, but there's no term for a parent who loses a child, and because it's just so
Yeah.
magnanimous of a loss that they just don't have a title for that. And it is so true that there's just not,
Yes.
which is weird, actually.
That's true. I agree with what Billy said. I just don't like the way he said it, and that it was Billy saying it because he
Yeah.
was saying it just to be combative
Yeah.
towards Nate. But he's absolutely right, and that's again why I think there's value in going to mortuary school. Not that you learn everything you could ever need to know there. You don't. It's a foundational knowledge, but I think it is important that you have that bigger picture, at least, of what you're gonna be doing as an industry and as a career. And then they're showing the funeral of the little boy,
Mhm.
and is it the dad that shows up? It's
Stepdad.
stepdad. Okay, yeah, that shows up, and he's
Well, it's Gabe's
Well, it's the little
stepdad. It's
boy's dad.
child's dad.
little boy's okay. That yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
Gabe's stepdad. And yeah, he
Yep.
comes in and like why wasn't he around at all until that moment? I questioned, because he's like, well, I bought that gun and it's your responsibility though, and kind of tells Gabe's it's all his fault basically, and yells at him in the middle of this funeral, and and
Hits
the
him.
mom does nothing.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing. I mean, should the gun have been accessible to a child? No. Does rubbing someone's face in that help? No. But is that a natural way to feel as a parent? Anger towards the other parent or whomever? Yeah. So it's all of it is very realistic, I think, on what families go through when accidents cause the death of anybody or a child specifically. You want to blame somebody, and there's maybe some truth in it in some cases, maybe not. Maybe should a gun be locked up? I think we all know the answer to that is yes. But is it helpful to anybody to make a scene of it at a funeral? No.
Not at that point. Do it later if you need to say something.
She knows, she knows.
They all know. Like what the show I love, it didn't dive into, and it didn't even open the can of talking about like gun safety or anything. Like they never literally addressed really anything to do with it, which I think that would have been a huge rabbit hole and kind of distracted from the rest of it. They just let it be what it was.
Yeah.
And they didn't make it about a handgun agenda or anything like that, which they easily could have.
That's true. They do a really good job of being neutral with those kind of issues.
Some of the topics, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think there's politics involved to a kid getting their hands on a weapon and hurting themselves. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. It's good that they didn't try to make it one. But it's I've seen accidental deaths for children. I've seen mothers that fall asleep with infants, and and people whose kids get hurt in the back. I've seen a child that was killed by the family dog. All kinds of terrible things happen to people, and you can always go back. And again, I think a gun is a little different. I do think it should have been locked up, and that's fair to say. It doesn't help to say that to a mother at that time. But also, sometimes things happen in the blink of an eye, and you could be sitting right there and something can happen. And it doesn't help to blame somebody at that time, but it also is your natural reaction as the other parent to somebody's got to be responsible,
Well,
So,
Right.
yeah.
Michelle was talking the last episode we did about, one of the restorations was a parent driving over their kid, like running
Yep.
over accidentally. We've had multiple kids getting run over by farm equipment here. It's big, very
Yep.
agricultural around here. And what I've noticed lately is a lot of people with little kids in the front seat. It drives
Really?
me nuts. I'm talking like 4 or 5 year old kids that they have up in the
Oh,
front
yeah.
seat.
No.
And I just want to go postal on these people at the gas station and stuff where I see them. I'm like, do you know what will happen to that child if you get in a car accident?
Not
Like,
even a serious one.
I would
no,
say just a fender bender.
that airbag goes
Um,
off, or I mean, that kid just cannot be protected in that front seat. And I've buried children that were in the front seat and
mm,
died because they weren't protected up there. And I'm just like, "Urgh," drives me nuts. But when you sit and meet with those families, you have to kind of put your prejudice and those thoughts aside. And that is a hard arrangement
Hard
when
thing
you're
to do.
sitting with a family knowing this was a potentially preventable death,
yeah.
or, like kids dying in bed with their parents, and the parent, like, that baby shouldn't have been in bed with you. Like, but you can't, it's not up to us to,
But also culturally, there's cultures that would tell you it should have been, and that if you're a terrible mother. I mean, moms, we can't do anything right for moms, but
no,
it's like, but
God, no.
I wanted to tell you guys this. So it wasn't a young, it was an early teen. I think he was 13, 14, maybe. Young man and I took care of these services years ago. But he broke into someone's home in the middle of the night with a gun, and he was shot by the homeowner and killed. And the family I mean, that was a hard arrangement and a hard service, because they went all the way to the way of he was murdered. Like, it was so awful. And, you know, those situations where it wasn't an accidental death. Somebody broke into this man's. Could you imagine somebody
Yeah.
breaks into your home, and then a 13-year-old boy can be, my 12-year-old stepson is 5'6". He's taller than me. They
Yeah.
can look like full-grown men in the dark of night.
You're not gonna know. And
You're not going to go, excuse
himself.
me, intruder, may I see your ID and make sure you're not a minor? That's not what happened.
No.
But
Right.
it was this whole thing locally about, if this man should be arrested for murdering this child, and all this is terrible. But imagine, again, we've talked about disenfranchised grief, and we'll continue to do so on this show. But imagine being those parents. Their son is dead. The circumstances are irrelevant to them. Their son is dead. They're probably
Yeah.
feeling a million things. And it can be really difficult for us as professionals to we have to stay neutral. We have to stay, kind of not on the side of, but we have to always consider the feelings of the people that we're meeting with, no matter the circumstances. And in that case, it's like, your mind goes to, well, why was your 13-year-old out at 2 a.m.? Why weren't you da 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 da? But man, when I was 13, my mom didn't know where I was sometimes. Was she? I don't
Right.
know. It's just so difficult when it comes to young people and things that they probably shouldn't be doing, or situations they shouldn't have been in, or
Right.
things like that, and trying to find somebody to blame for it. And that kind of stuff
Another
destroys families long term.
big part of this episode was Brenda wanting to take Nate to go shop at all these other.
Was that this episode?
Yeah.
Oh, it was. Oh gosh.
And how fun would that be? Like, Michelle, would you love going and pretending and
Yeah. So, I think she kind of wanted to do it like to teaching, right? To like have him learn. But I don't think he learned anything.
We learned
in
what
there.
not to do in some cases, I
In
think.
some cases, yeah. But I thought the same thing. Although she kept coming up with these elaborate stories, and I was just like, if I was the funeral director on the other end of this, I think I would pick up on this is probably not true.
Yeah.
Like the helicopter, exploded in the air.
was it
I
not
don't
on
know,
the
probably
news or like
some of the
live?
news, like
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, I thought it would be a blast to be able to go do that. Just walk in, and I mean, Yeah, who knows what you would experience, what you would see from so many different funeral homes. Who
That's
All
knows?
these funeral homes they went to were so opulent too, and they had these huge desks. Like, I don't know. I've never worked in a funeral home where I met a family behind a desk. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have, yeah,
Have
and I
you?
hate it. I hate it. It
Yeah.
feels very businessy, and it's like there's a barrier between you. That's not my ideal setup. I don't love that as much as other setups.
Yeah.
But yeah, her stories were hilarious. But then she pretends she's dying and throws him completely off because he didn't
Yes.
know she was going to do this, and I think it scared him more than it did like piss him off because I think he realized like, well, crap, like if I could lose, I'm going to lose you. And she's like, we all die, Nate. Like we all die. She
Yeah.
was wearing a
Yeah.
wedding band too in that.
Oh,
And
was she? You're
I had
right.
wrote
Oh,
down
gosh.
she was wearing a wedding band.
Yeah.
Why was she? But then I guess if they were pretending they were married for this,
They're
maybe she
pretending.
threw on a ring or something. But I thought it was odd. She had on like a wedding band when they were out doing that.
Shopping. Yeah.
Shopping. Yeah.
But how
I I feel like it was a good part of the episode. I didn't like it, honestly, because I'm like, why are we doing this? Why are we like trying to show how bad some funeral homes are? Can we just show, because that always bothers me when it's like in order to make ourselves look better, we have to talk about how bad the other people are. But I mean, I don't know. I don't think there's bad funeral homes out there in many ways, absolutely. But I would hope to think that most of them aren't going to sit you down and be like, just sign here and then worry about the cost. Like some of the things that went on in those scenarios, I feel like they almost wanted to portray it like that was the norm,
right?
and that's not the norm.
I think they were showing like the lesson that hopefully he was going to maybe get was that the way we set ourselves apart is like he has said before,
Mhm.
we are going to set ourselves apart and we are going to have to get our business based on the quality of service we're giving and that we are different and unique. And all these places, they're like, oh, well, it was a accident, a helicopter accident. And his first response was, well, that sounds like we need matching caskets then, kind
Right.
of thing.
Yeah.
And so everything was always the merchandise and the sale. And here's my response to you is we need to pick out this. And oh, a mahogany box would be the ideal choice for you. And it was like, okay, like hopefully he's picking up what they're putting down because that is what you want to be avoiding. But that's kind of David tactic. And so we'll see, I guess, if Nate really brings anything back to try and help them. But then later we do see because Nate or David was hungover from his ecstasy. And
Yeah.
that dad comes in the funeral and is saying stuff, and Nate pulls him aside and talks to him and is basically like, we don't know how long we're going to be here for. And the dad's like, how dare you say that to me? He's like, no, dude, like, we don't know.
Yeah.
So pick a better time because this isn't it. Have your son's funeral, move on. Like, come on, this is not how it works. So
Yeah.
what do you guys think of that? Like, he was a little brutal, but yet
Yeah.
it was good.
Yeah. I thought it was good, but same story. I was like, if you did that at a funeral home, you'd get fired.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
just because he was, he was a little brash with him and, cussing at him and stuff. But yeah, I thought it at least opened the dad's eyes a little bit. I think he kind of calmed down and recognized like, yeah, all right, and went on his way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they have the benefit of it being a TV show and they can do things a lot more dramatically than they would have been done in real life.
Yeah.
Um, just kind of like going to those funeral homes, I guess I would kind of like, I don't know. I feel like most funeral homes aren't that bad.
No,
Not in that way, at least, gosh. So to me, I was like, oh God, why are
Hollywood
they
version.
perpetuating this? Why are they perpetuating the idea that not being a scumbag is different? Like,
Right.
most funeral homes aren't scumbags. They're just not. The ones that are the ones that you remember. But so I didn't love that. But again, when you've got when you've got drama happening in the chapel, it's such a hard thing because it's like I'm not a bouncer, I'm not security, I'm not police, I'm not this or that, but you're the professional there too. So I think there's oftentimes what we do that people don't realize is we have to do things that really are kind of outside of our scope. We're not trained in self, de-escalation. Maybe we should be more, but it's like so many things become part of our responsibility that you don't really think about, that we're not any more trained in than anybody else. We have to de-escalate these really awful situations sometimes, and it's not like we're FBI negotiators. We're just regular people trying to, stop a brawl. And
Right.
we don't have those skills inherently because we're funeral directors, like,
No.
but it's just one of those things that unfortunately sometimes we have to do, and we don't always do it the best way, but what do you
We figure
do?
it out. You have to just kind of
Figure it out.
roll with each scenario we're in, because you can't even come up with, I think, a lot of the scenarios we get put into,
No,
because
no.
we are involved. It's very cliche, but we're involved with every person, every walk of life, every logistical setup of a family dynamic of boyfriends, girlfriends, lovers, children, stepchildren, ex-wives, like all of it mixed in together. And every family's different in that way as to who the players are, what the emotions are. And you have to kind of just roll and figure it out as you're going through. And so that's why, like, if you don't know how to read people and communicate and things like that, you're not going to make a great funeral director when you're
Right.
working with the families, because you have to be able to read people. You have to be able to have conversations and listen to them, which is what David is not great at doing. He's great at serving, but he's not good at having good communication with them and really listening to the needs and figuring out what they want. And
He's
that's
good at playing the part, but he's not really, really, truly
yeah.
good at it, in that way. But I like at the end when he's at Brenda's house, just talking about how it just wasn't a good day, and this said like there's nothing good about having to deal with a
Yeah.
family of a 6-year-old, and they
6-year-old.
spend a couple minutes talking about that. And we talk a lot about compassion fatigue and burnout and all of that in the industry. And, you know, um, we're getting better about it, I think, but ultimately it's just a hard thing for funeral professionals because we have to take all of that on and then go home and try to be normal. And it's really, really hard
Yeah.
sometimes. But also you have to build resiliency so you can go back and do it the next day, because the family whose mom dies in hospice tonight doesn't really care that you're upset because yesterday this other thing happened. And it's a really difficult thing that you can't teach. You can't teach people how to do that. You either are able to do it or you're not. And it's one
Yeah.
of those things
Yep.
I feel like I get asked a lot, and you guys probably do too. Well, how do you do? I don't know. You either do or you don't. There's no,
Yep.
there's no, here's how you deal with all these terrible things you see every day and da 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 da. There's no answer.
There's no handbook, there's no magic, anything.
Yep.
And, looking at every family as being equally as broken from a
Mm.
loss, like you said, oh, you got this call, and then you also have the other call. And I was filling in a funeral home, it's a very small town. We got a call, or I got called out to the hospice where, 2 a.m. I'm at this hospice home bringing somebody into our care. And they said, well, and I was talking about when they could come in, and they said, well, you're going to be very busy this week, I imagine, because of what happened last night. So we understand that, maybe we won't be your priority. And I was like, what happened? Like, I hadn't
Yeah.
heard. I had no idea. I didn't watch the 10 o'clock news the night before. And the star basketball player shot the winning shot and then collapsed and died. And
Oh,
so, and by next morning, it was international news. Like, this thing, we had like Inside Edition and like Sports Illustrated, you name it, was at the funeral. Like, it was insane how
Same.
big
Yeah.
this death went. And so I had this nice little Catholic family that had lost grandpa at the hospice home and had his funeral during the same time as I was also doing with this other. And it was a staff of 3 people, me
Mhm.
and 2 other part-timers. And that was it. That's all we had. So another funeral home reached out and was like, hey, we're here. What do you need from us? And helped with the funeral. And I mean, we made it all work and it all went great. But that loss was no less than, the other, just because of age, circumstance, whatever. And sometimes I think we get caught up in the, oh, it's a child, or, oh, this is a rideable, oh, this is a doctor in town, or oh, this is whatever, but it doesn't change just because it's one or the other type of scenario. It's still a loss.
Right.
That person was still important. And I think sometimes that gets forgotten as we're working with families when we have some of these big calls and children and things like that. But
Yeah.
so this episode, we'll wind down here. This last part of this episode I want to just bring up was Ruth and the dad. And I can't remember dad's name. And
Nate.
she's
Nathaniel.
Oh yeah,
Nathaniel.
it's Nathaniel. Yep. So she keeps having these visions of him during this.
Well, she took the ecstasy.
Well, she did, yes. And so she has this whole conversation with him about kind of moving on. And he says, I love that you're, becoming this amazing woman and stuff. And he states, I was dead long before I died. And I was like, oh, like he was going through some things and was not happy. And it kind of explains why they were disconnected for so long and why all this stuff was going on and why he had sought the little room and everything. So like, what do you guys think about all that? I kind of love that they brought this moment in that they kind of reconciled some of the questions that were out there. But what did you guys think?
I like it for the show. I think it's important for for the characters on the show. I don't think it's realistic.
Obviously.
I don't think that we get, maybe we do. I don't know. I don't get visited by my deceased loved ones to have all of our issues resolved.
You didn't take enough ecstasy. That's
shit.
That's
what I meant. There we go. Okay.
Yes.
I like it for the show. Yeah. I think it was nice for the show. I don't think it's not realistic, but maybe I haven't taken ecstasy, so I better try it. And I'll let you know.
Yeah.
If you find out, Faith, you let me know. Okay.
I will.
I've never,
I will.
I've never tried that. But yeah, same story. I liked it for the show. I kind of thought it was, to me, well, like we talked about a little while ago, with how long has it actually been since she started redating and stuff? That's a question I've had. And so I know that I have kind of felt like, oh, it's great that she's kind of out and, getting back out there. But I've also been like, how long has this been?
Yeah.
So
girl, slow down.
the beginning of the episodes, when they tell the person that died, aren't there dates? They give their dates, but I don't know.
They give the years.
There's no actual dates.
I think it's just the years.
Okay. Because
almost certain,
it's been like 6 months or something.
I feel like it's got to be. You can't tell by like the time of year either because it's California.
Yeah, so we'll have to see if there's other like little hints that maybe.
Yeah, I haven't heard any mention. I know that they're still in school. So he died before Thanksgiving, right? Because they had Thanksgiving without him. And they're still in school. I don't remember anything.
Indicators. We'll have to.
Yeah, I don't remember anything about.
You guys know any indicators, viewers? Let us know if you have watched and know kind of timeline. Because I don't know.
I kind of liked how at the end he made me feel like he was okay with her,
it was like he gave her
back
permission.
Out there. Yeah. So that kind of helped me with her character.
Yeah, she needed that for the character story for sure. Again, they have the freedom of being a TV show to do stuff that doesn't happen in real life, and
So it says like the show, the whole duration is somewhere between 5 and 6 years from when it starts to when it ends completely. So, is every season like a year-ish?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I really don't.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. I'm wondering. I'll have to dive into that more because that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I would say 6 months is probably at least that.
It's got to be, I feel like. But who knows? I guess we'll figure it out eventually.
Yeah. Well, how long is... I guess at the beginning, Rico found out that his wife was pregnant, and at the end, she was pretty showing, maybe like 7 months. I don't know. Everybody's body's different.
That's probably she's got to be getting closer because he said then when the baby comes, I'm going to need more time kind of off. So yeah.
She was pregnant the first episode. we don't know how far along. And in this episode, she's visibly pregnant. Like, I wouldn't say she's about to pop, but I would say probably 7 months. I don't know.
I
Everybody's
think we're at the
different.
6-7 months. I mean,
6 or 7 months.
if each season, if each season is 1 year about, I mean, it's kind of covering
Yeah.
a month per episode ish kind of thing. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's guess here. We'll guess. Well, thank you guys for joining us for another episode. Thanks to Michelle for joining us again. We will bring
Thank
her
you.
back later in the series to do some more episodes with us. So watch for more guests that we'll have along the way, and we'll catch you guys next week for episode 10, The New Person. I love this episode. I love it so much.
I love this actress too.
She's so great.
She is.
I want to kind of hang out with her for
I
a
do
little
too.
bit.
See if we can get her, call her, message her
know.
on Instagram. Maybe
I will
she'll.
do that. Hello, would you like to join us to discuss your episode?
She might. You never know. Maybe she needs.
No.
Maybe she needs
We'll
something
throw
to do.
some Hail Marys out and see what happens.
Yeah.
So, well, thanks, guys. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.